Welcome back guys to Java Space. So in this video I'm going to mention some of the use cases. So this would include some of which I had to implement in real projects, both in my current employment and in my one of my previous employments. So case number one. There was a time in one of my previous employment where I was working on a Magento framework. So in our code, we were supposed to intercept order creation. So when a customer is logged in on an e-commerce website and they are making an order. So what we needed to do was, before the user clicks place an order, we needed to add some logic there. But the problem was that Magento framework is not our code. It's a framework that was built by some other entity. So we didn't have a way to modify that source code. The only thing that we needed to do was to implement some advices to advise that method execution. So use case, one of the rules was that if the user does not belong to a certain user group, they cannot create an order. Or if the user is making an order after a specific time, add some logic. Or if the order is being done by a B2B, that means it's business to business transaction that is being done. Let's say in our e-commerce website, a business has registered. You can think of something like Take a Lot, that a business registered with them and they also do business there as a business. So now, if a business has registered, has signed in that our e-commerce Magento website, and they are placing an order, there are some certain conditions that we had to put in place. And for that, we had to use around advice. I think that was probably the first time when I had an opportunity to use an around advice in an industry specific code. So what we would do, we would intercept the execution of that method before. That means when the control enters that execution, we intercept. Then we do we apply some business logic. Then we implicitly or explicitly had to write code to proceed, which means we call the target. Then after that, we do some other logic, and then we then return the call to, we return control to the caller. So that was the first use case that I had. So another use case could be that you want to send an email. I had already mentioned this one. When an exception is thrown at a specific code, maybe because that code is critical and you really want to monitor it thoroughly, then you can create an endpoint to say, if this method execution results in an exception, then I want to send an email, which would then make developers to be able to debug and to know what really happened. As I've mentioned, input validation and modification without having to touch the original code base. You want to intercept the transferring of money from one account to the other without touching that code base. And you want to validate the input to make sure that the inputs is not SQL injections or malicious, values, stuff like that. Or let's say you want to log some suspicious transaction in your application, and one of the business rules in your company is that if someone is trying to withdraw more than they have, then we regard that as suspicious. Or someone is trying to hack to do some transferring of money, there could be many rules or many cases around that, but we want to log that suspicious execution or transaction, whatever you can call it. Then in that way you will also implement some, you'll also implement that kind of advice, and you can decide whether it becomes a before or it becomes an after. It all depends on the case, depending on what I have mentioned. I have explained what is a before advice, after returning advice, after advice, then also after throwing, and around advice.